ReCore's opening hours are greatly enticing. It's a breadcrumb trail of plot and mechanics doled out at just the right pace, almost in preparation for what I would akin to opening a wrapped present. But that moment of joy never came in my time with ReCore. Instead, I was faced with a frustratingly fragmented story and an utter chore of a game to play through. Why? Let's take a look. Set hundreds of years after a devastating disease has left Earth uninhabitable, humanity seeks to create a new home on a planet known as Fire Eden. You control Jewel, one of the first colonists sent to ensure the terraforming process goes smoothly as the rest of the new tenants await frozen in space. Robotic companions known as Corebots were built by Jewel's father to assist the colonists in their efforts, each with frames that give them a creature-like form such as a dog, spider, or ape. Jewel awakens from her frozen sleep to discover the work on Fire Eden has gone awry, with many of the structures and machinery left in a desolate state. There's a wealth of lore and flavour dialogue from audio logs scattered throughout the world, but ReCore's main narrative is quite shallow due to its almost unfinished nature. There are long stretches of gameplay between story beats due to the extremely padded nature of the game's structure of progression. For what is in the game isn't awful. There is an excitement in the first few cutscenes as characters meet face to face and begin developing relationships. However, little is done outside of these minimal glimpses into ReCore's world, and this lack of polish combined with the aforementioned stretches of lifeless gameplay left me disappointed. It's also worth mentioning, without spoilers, that ReCore ends so poorly and abrupt, it doesn't even roll credits at the end. Instead, you're thrown back to the main menu without as much as a thanks for playing, in a way that adds to my theory that ReCore just simply isn't a finished game. I would akin ReCore's gameplay to a mix of bullet hell combat, a Zelda-style overworld with dungeons, and a snappy platformer. The combat has subtle but cool quirks with the use of colour as its central theme. Your own robotic companions and enemy Corebots have the basic colours of red, yellow and blue, while Jewel's assault rifle can switch to any one of those colours on the fly. Switching to the appropriate colours and Corebots to face off against enemies is vital to being as efficiently destructive as possible while still dodging attacks. Jewel's dash and double jump can help her avoid the onslaught of enemy attacks as she whittles down their health one by one. Once an enemy's health is low enough, you can try to tug out their core and upgrade your own Corebot's base stats, or finish them off to gain materials and craft upgrades for your robotic cohort's body frame. There's a frenetically exciting aspect to this colour-coded combat system. Enemies switching colours on the fly to keep you swapping out your firing mode and companions makes almost every fight intense and interesting. While the game's combat isn't terribly hard, it does suffer from multiple difficulty spikes that are only exacerbated by the awfully slow character progression. It's not enough that ReCore becomes a grind in its late stages to reach the final portions of the story, it becomes a game of patience as you bang your head against the final levels hoping you're not one-shotted by enemies or under-leveled for what the game will throw at you next. ReCore's biggest crime is one of progression-based collectibles. What are called prismatic cores are a source of near-limitless energy, a kind coveted both by Jewel and the antagonist for plot reasons. However, for the player, they're a nuisance that simply gets in the way of reaching the next story beat or dungeon. You collect prismatic cores from exploring Fire Eden, defeating wandering bosses, completing dungeons and challenges tied to said dungeons. This all sounds great, but this is where the aforementioned stretches of lifeless gameplay come into the picture. There were enough 2 to 3 hour flavourless gaps between any dialogue or plot development that made exploring Fire Eden's world mindless to a point. Where side dungeons and optional bosses originally had their place as a neat distraction to the game's story progression, they eventually become irritatingly essential components to finishing the game's story. It's also worth mentioning the console version of ReCore has its fair share of technical and performance issues that plagued the 10 to 12 hours I had spent with it. Graphical glitches had caused textures to spasm onto my screen as I tried to complete the tightly focused platforming segments. The framerate dropped into the low 10s while trying to finish combat rooms within dungeons, which makes them a nightmare to complete when the game simply can't keep up with its own fast-paced combat. On top of that, long load times, a handful of crashes, and unintelligible physics glitches only tripled my frustrations with the game's already sloth-like progression. ReCore is by no means an awful game. The style of combat and structure are unlike anything I've seen in the past few years. It plays like a game that would have existed on the PS2 but remade for modern consoles, and that's why I find it such a fresh experience. But that just doesn't excuse the lack of polish on almost every facet of the game itself. It's an unfortunately unfinished mess of technical problems with a disjointed story and poorly pieced together second half that makes ReCore a 2 out of 5. Hey folks, thanks for watching. Sorry the review's a little late. I'm editing this at 1 AM, so that's why I sound a little froggier, if you will. But yeah, ReCore review's out. It's, you know, I wanted to like that game. I really did. It did some really cool things that not a lot of games do, and it's just shitty. It's shitty that, like, it's so unfinished. Because, like, with more time or with something, with maybe better, like, management, I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea how that game's development went, but that's it anyway for now. I finally have a video on the channel that can upstage Luke, because he's been killing it. You should go watch his Def Jam video, it's pretty good. You should watch his Deus Ex review, that's also pretty good, and he's got one on Forza coming on the way. So yeah, that's kind of it for now. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you later.